Well, today we have with us not only a star, in my opinion, but a warrior. If I could assemble a biblical image of Deborah in the Bible, the great warrior woman of God, I would think of Star Parker, who we have with us today. And Star is on the front lines of doing everything she can to change the cultural direction of where America is at and where it should go. And we need this more and more in our country today. And so it is an honor to have with us Star Parker. And just so our audience knows a little bit about you, you are the founder and president of CURE. The acronym stands for?
The Center for Urban Renewal and Education.
And you have had quite a bit of success with this, because if I remember right, you made some impressions even upon President Trump and his administration, and beyond that. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, that's starting from a year ago, and then I'll go backwards with you. And thank you for having me with you, because this is exciting. And especially now you said, you're like Deborah. Good, because that's what people say. You're aggressive. I'm like, I like Deborah was aggressive. Then when they say, oh, they have all these things they want to say, I always pick Bible characters to say, well, that's their personality too, so I appreciate that. Yeah, actually, President Trump wanted to fix the inner cities. He ran on it. He told the world that he was going to fix the inner cities. He asked black people, what do you have to lose? Even though they didn't vote for him in major numbers that year, he still wanted to fix the inner cities. So I was one of the folks on a task force trying to help shape that, what that should look like. It ended up where Senator Tim Scott and Senator Booker put in the tax bill an Opportunity Zone Initiative, that's right. Yes. So in that, we were able to identify all 8,700 broken zip codes. And I'd always been through CURE about that little lost sheep, because God liked that little lost sheep, and we wanted to help them recover their lives, put them on a path to where they could be healthy and whole in America. So I was able to do that. But he also put me on a commission. It is a civil rights committee for the state of California, and we answer to the city, to the National Civil Rights Commission, which is where they look for race disparities. And so in the new appointments that Trump made for the state of California, we were able to push through to study the impact of AB 5 on minorities. I know there are a whole lot of people that are very upset that that's what we're studying, but we thought it's worthwhile because a lot of folks are in the gig business. A lot of people want to stay independent of working for a union, so it's been really fun.
This is the first I've heard of this, and I have to tell you, being a native Californian, and the fact that we know that Trump came here for various fundraising events, but he never really campaigned here. I know that he went up to the farm area near Fresno, and that was a big deal because he met with farmers. It was a small gathering, but he released the water back into the custody of the farmers, which was amazing, rather than have it go out to the ocean. Right. And but other than that, I just thought Trump didn't have any involvement whatsoever in California. But you're
he had a
saying
lot
that he
of
had a plan.
Well, he had a plan to fix all of the inner cities. And when you think about the Civil Rights Commission and what normally happens through all of these organizations, if you will, governmental interest in black or ethnic or race dynamics, the left has controlled that space well since they started. The 60s is when we saw many of these things come up after the Johnson administration, and then it moved into affirmative action and race preferences, and so it's destroyed a lot of race relationships and other things like that. But these are commissions, and each president gets a chance to put people on there. Many of the Republicans just ignored that opportunity, but President Trump said, then put people on there. So it wasn't just in California, it's all over the country. Wherever he saw an empty space on the committee, he put people on there.
Are those committees still going, or have they been canceled?
Oh, no. Well, they can't be canceled. They're part of
This is great to hear.
They're part of the United States Civil Rights Commission. The reason that when the left, people like BLM and Antifa complain about race dynamics and all of the woe is me's, they're relying on the country, because what happened after the 60s is the structures were set up that if someone has a complaint, they do have somewhere to go. We have many of that. Every single department has a civil rights arm. And so they have people that are both sides of the aisle appointed to them by the president. President Trump is one of the first Republican presidents that took advantage of that. So now you have a lot of conservative 7 libertarians on these committees all across the country looking to really find what's broken down and see if we can actually fix it.
So in California, we have the most incredible homeless situation going on. And what can you share about that? What's happened to where several years ago that wasn't something that you saw, and then now you do, and you see it everywhere? What's happened? What transpired or didn't transpire
That's
for this?
really interesting question, because the committee I just told you about, we were looking at homeless too. In fact, I was the one that wanted to work on that area. And then when it came down to the vote, everybody else that was more center right was going toward AB 5. So I threw my vote there and we won by 1 vote to study that. But homelessness is my passion area for a variety of reasons. Not just my brother has lived on the street for 25 years, but you know my background, because when I came into your church and talked about, you know, what God delivered me from and to, the criminal activity, the drug activity, the sexual activity, you know, I mean, well, he's such a fulfilling God. Like, he knows to go get that little lost sheep, and he knows where we are. And so he does that with the homeless as well. But the challenge and what changed was that the right looks at homelessness mostly through a Christian lens, that person is a unique individual and has something that they can contribute to society. They just got lost. So let's go find out what it is. There might be drugs, there might be alcohol, it might be economic. It could be that they're mental problems, or it could be just they're disabled. But the left looks at it very differently. They like them in that capacity. They think that there's nothing wrong except that the Bible thumpers keep saying there's something wrong. So they just want them comfortable in that state. So when Barack Obama won the presidency back in 2008, he changed the rules. He moved, what used to happen was homelessness was in HHS, Health and Human Services, because Health and Human Services, the department, and then they spread their wings everywhere, handles human tragedies, human issues. He moved it from there, the budgeting, to HUD, because they think it's a housing problem. So they'd rather go buy them tents. And so what happened, the impact across the country over the last 10 years is that the people that were serving the homeless, looking at all the areas where they're broken down and helping them fix their lives, all of a sudden their budgets dried up. So now they can go from 300 beds to 30 beds. In fact, one called the Red Door up in San Francisco area almost collapsed because of that one change. And so they've been working to get that thing changed back. But in the meantime, it just forced every homeless person out into the streets. And it's interesting, you asked about President Trump. He was fixing that too. He had hired a person out of Texas, and we had just finished all of the planning, and then COVID hit.
Yeah. Remarkable. We had no plan. We had no idea that we'd be talking about Trump like this. That was not my plan.
Well, but in a way, you have to say, as aggressive as it was, and in fact, my 5th book was called Necessary Noise. How, you know, he inflames the culture war and why this is good news for America, because he did inflame it. And there are many instances we can see through Scripture where God would choose a total heathen to change things, to get his brick against the wall and make you make harder choices, or even know that there's a challenge. And so he did some wonderful things in that time. And I think that even today, that the baton was passed to these folks, these pagans, to show people just how dark it can get. Both were administrations that I think were very welcome into our society, because we reached a point we just couldn't go on like we were. You know, I've been in Washington in and out for 25 years, and my cure policy is in Washington, D.C. It's not just a deep state, it's a dark state, and it's nowhere near what the founders had in mind. They really wanted a limited role of government, and now government's a quarter of all of our budget is only on these poverty programs, which are people programs, and we don't want that. This is not where things should be, but most Americans, especially Bible-believing Americans, were just ignoring the obvious. It didn't touch them, so they didn't do anything. They didn't put any passion into it, and so I think God wanted to get their attention.
You said something a moment ago, and I'm gonna act like it cannot be true. So I'm gonna ask you to defend what you said a moment ago. You said that when the Democrat Party made the change under Obama from Health and Human Services to HUD regarding the homeless, you said something to the effect that they're okay with people living in tents. How can that possibly be true? How could they, I mean, really?
How did they disconnect from that's a human being? You know, these are the elite. These are the people that kill babies in the womb because they actually think that
And
they
now
may be
out
born.
of the womb.
I'm so thankful that you're fighting that from happening here
Yep.
in California, because it could happen. It will happen if we don't stand our ground to make sure that God's reward is brought to bear in this earth. But yeah, they're elite. They are following. This is not a new discussion we're having. This is all throughout the scripture. What's happening for most Christian Americans is they never thought it would happen, and they have to make these determinations. We've been spoiled. We've lived, you know, what did one of the scriptures told us, that Moab settled on her lees. She hadn't been
right.
shifted, and so now, and tilted, and so now that's what's occurring. And so we have to remember why we believe what we believe. But yeah, the left, the enemies of God have always been. The King Solomon said they're an abomination to God. And so yeah, they when they ride by homeless, they don't even see them. Christians see them. They just don't know what to do about them.
Wow.
It's just a reality, and it's a continuous. That's why they trap poor children in failing schools. That's why they have nothing to do with ghetto. They just think it's okay. And there are Christian people that say, but it's not okay. They just don't know what to do.
So not too long ago in this state, there was numerically, this state hosted the biggest governor recall in American history. Gavin Newsom was handed basically you're fired notice, and was forced into an election. And Larry Elder, he's a dear friend of ours. We love him. Larry Elder got more votes than all of the other candidates combined, and Larry Elder had that front position because he had a plan. And one of the things that blew my mind and I loved about what Larry was saying, and it kind of just rings true to what you were just saying a moment ago. I agree with you, Star, that the condition that we're in is because of the absence of Christian involvement. And Larry had asked me if he were elected, if I could head up activating the churches in California by zip code. You mentioned zip code. And he said, based upon a church's capability, there's big churches, medium, small churches. He said, I don't even care about that. But if it's a small church in that zip code, maybe they could reach out to that 1, 2, 3, or 5 homeless people that are nearest to them and begin to give them a life, give them the gospel, give them a trade, take them in, adopt them off the streets. A church could do this. And it was thrilling. I got so excited about what was going to be coming. Of course, it didn't turn out that way.
And it might not have even come that way, because one of the things that people don't understand about the political process is it's entrenched in HUD. So even if you wanted to do it and the church wanted to do it, it's illegal to do it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, you have to work through the structure, if you will. And now that's in HUD. It's incredible what has happened. When the budget was $2 billion for the homeless, we had about 200,000 in the country. They increased the budget because it's housing problem to $4 billion. Now we have 800,000.
Well, of course.
Okay, this is government. This is what they do when they create problems. This is the same strategy they used when they built out the ghettos, the housing projects, the Section 8. They tell people, don't work, don't save, don't get married, and we'll kind of keep you right here in that discomfort. But I think Larry would have done it. He would have gotten the
Figured
interest
out
in
a
it.
way.
That's why I want him in Washington, D.C. now. I said, you know what? Someone ought to send him how many times President Lincoln lost before he won.
So true.
And then that way he'll still come.
Not only lost, but Lincoln suffered so much death around his life with his loved ones.
So her, especially with Dianne Feinstein ill right now, maybe he should look at that. Maybe look at a congressional seat down in Orange County, so that move up the apparatus and make the changes that need to occur.
So Larry, we're sending you a message, Larry Elder.
He's a good friend.
He's a
really good friend. But I think that you're onto something when you look at what it is that the liberals have done to damage what God has asked us to do. You know, we think about some of the social problems that we have, and the church responds to them, what the LGBTQ community is doing or attempted to do with our children. So there's a reaction to that. What they've done through abortion, then there's a reaction to that. But where we're now moving, and we should move in society, and that's why I do give Trump credit for having us focus on those broken zip codes, is we need to go and see what has happened to our poor. What has happened to those that God has told us to care about? Now, what the left has sent out in messaging is that, oh, those people don't really care. They won't spend any money in it. But what many don't appreciate is how much money we actually do spend. Now, it's not a lot of the church doing it. It's always like, the 20% doing the heavy lifting. But that 20%, you know what it looks like? $400 billion here, $300 billion abroad. $900 billion in a welfare state forced into the coffers of Washington out of their paycheck, and that doesn't even include the tithe. So that means that people are benevolent.
That's
So
right.
they just don't know how do you fix what we keep seeing? So we do have enough programs going here and there, but a strategy is what really has to occur. And that's why there was energy and momentum behind Larry, because you're right, he was approaching it more like a businessman, not a politician. Politician always blames somebody else for why they can't get something done. But a businessman looks in the mirror, says, I'm the reason something's not done. I need to make some changes. And so Larry has more business mind and would have really been effective here in California.
Yes. So I don't know if what I'm going to say is going to get me in trouble or blow up something, but Larry had name recognition. Mm-hmm. He had the votes. Mm-hmm. He had the rallies. People showed up in numbers.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Okay? Mm-hmm. And he campaigned hard.
Mm-hmm.
But the party that he represented with the R on the end of his name, they didn't get behind him.
The status quo party.
They actually made it harder for him. And I saw that. I got to watch that firsthand. What's going on?
The RNC, the Republican Party, is a business. And in that business, they have a board. We call them the 168ers. Every state gets two, every territory gets two, and then they have alternates, I think they call them. So, and those guys, it's just business for them. They're not thinking about making changes. It's a comfort zone. It's a political party. And the 168ers is where people that are being compelled to go do something, instead of running for office, maybe they should think about replacing one of the committeemen.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
exactly.
because that's what happens. The orders come from top, and they come down, and so it's just a party. The only reason I ran for office years ago here in California is because that was the year Michael Steele had won the RNC chairmanship. And say what you will about him, and he has gone way left. But when he won, and he saw that there were districts where they just weren't even running people.
Yes.
And yet the country's turning blue. And he's like, wait a minute, you don't run people there? Well, they'll never win. How do you know that?
Wow.
So he told them when the 168ers went to their party in Hawaii, you run someone in every district. And so when the California LA party came back, they're like, well, if we have to run somebody, maybe we should get somebody that can at least, get some attention. And so they dragged me into that thing. We got a lot of attention though. And but you know how I looked at it? First of all, 5 months was not enough time to undo 50 years of social engineering. That's what happens when you leave communities where the weeds come in, the dirt gets hard, now there's cement on it. It's just gonna take time, but you have to spend the time. And so even with Larry, he is a national figure now. So now it's just time. And time could be on his side because people in California know something's going terribly wrong. Was one of the reasons that guy's running up in LA. He's like, I don't want to leave LA. I love LA.
Who's this?
Caruso's his name.
Caruso.
Yeah,
this
he's
is
running for the mayor.
For mayor of Los Angeles.
Yeah, businessman.
Businessman. Big businessman.
Big businessman. And his ads are really interesting because he's just saying, look, I don't want to leave LA. I love LA and we can fix this together. And so basically what he's saying is let's do this. One of the downsides to what happened to Larry is it was too close to Trump and people were too mad at Trump. And so it brought out, once they started messaging that he's just another Trump, it brought the liberals to the polls. But I think that there might be enough distance now that Caruso could pull out LA. If he's able to do that, you can then start to see that cement getting hammered on. It can be fixed. People are fixing it all around the world and looking into America because of the BUILD Act that Trump also did over in countries in Africa, but also here. We can see it in all of our little broken down zip codes that there's some activity. Greenville, South Carolina, for instance, they just came out with a book just was written about what they've been able to do. It's called Reimagining Greenville. They took that city and flipped it, and now Global Travelers Magazine say if you go to California, if you go to U.S. and you haven't gone to Greenville, you missed America. We can turn this around. It's just a matter of getting someone with the passion to say, I can fix it, but to your point, neighborhood at a time.
Yes.
These churches, I was just talking to one of our pastors. We have 3 programs in CURE. We have the policy program, we have a media program, and we have a clergy association. I was talking to one of my clergy. He told me, I'm passing the baton to a new clergy. I said, well, when I'm in LA, I'll like to meet with him. He said, well, I'll have to get an appointment because, he lives way out. Like, I don't want to say because they're going to know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm like, what kind of pastor doesn't live in his community?
Exactly.
Never mind.
You got to be a pastor.
Never mind. I'm just.
No need to meet.
If you fix your blocks, if you took the Nehemiah model and fixed your blocks and it's just next to each other.
Fight in front of your door.
Right in front of your door.
House.
That's right. So that's where churches have decided to go with a lot of their attention, and the vultures come in. The pagans are there now, so it's making it harder. The cancer's metastasized, but there's healing even in stage 4.
So it's been said, and there's been those who have said it, that California, that they have hope for California because it's gone so low, it's gone so down, that there's no further place for it to go. I want to believe that's true.
It's not true.
But I don't believe it. I think it could go much worse. What would you say needs to happen in California? Because you have great insights to what's going on, what's wrong, and what could be right. What does the average Californian need to do if they don't want to move? I have to tell you, could I move? I could move. I've been pastoring this church for over 30 years. Yeah, well, hypothetically, right? I mean, I've pastored here for more than 30 years. I could go, but I don't want to go.
No.
And I'm not going to go.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
I work in D.C., but I'm not leaving California. God called California. Most of our cities are named after saints. This is the place to be free. You know, every time I come and you see the ocean, it reminds me of that poet that said, when I just see that orange skew over the horizon, my sense of possibility returns. We know what that means as Californians. We've just let it get away from us, and we need to take it back. So it's a war. And I don't think that everybody's going to need to leave. And in particular, when it comes to property taxes, one of the initiatives by a Republican here in our state keeps our property tax so low that if you can get a house, you can keep your house, even when you age in your house. No, this is just going to take some fight. And most of that fight is you and leading your congregation to say, no, it's not about the economic conditions for why we might leave and go somewhere that's just brutal, that doesn't have what we have in terms of freedom and beauty, but it's because of that freedom and beauty. God wants us to fight for his land, and we need to do it. And we're dark, but that's why the light has to shine here.
I love what you just said. It's so encouraging, and maybe it's because I'm a native Californian that I say this, but very few people know what you just said, that most of our cities are named after religious figures and our saints. For example, Sacramento is referencing the sacredness, sacrament.
Oh, wow.
Sacramento. This is the only state out of all the 50 states that have mission stations that Father Sarah established to preach the gospel.
That's right.
It's the only state in America that has the El Camino Real, the King's Highway, King Jesus. But what is good is always under attack. I mean, you can't say anything. Star Parker cannot say anything that is good without it being attacked. Same goes for me. But what do we expect? Here's the thing that I wish and hope and pray that Californians wake up to. That this state's worth fighting for. Well, people are going to criticize us if we take a stand. So what? It's worth fighting for. And technologies, right here. Computer, aviation, right here. Gold rush.
It's
right here.
It's an incredible, it's freedom, and we're losing that freedom, and we have to get our passion to want it back. You mentioned technology. You know, I've used many a time in my column during this abortion debate that we're having, Steve Jobs as an example of, would your life be better or worse without him? I mean, my goodness, he was a single mom. Here she is pregnant with this kid who died. And he got adopted out. I mean, adoption is a beautiful option. God adopted us into his family. So I think that there are a lot of the techie guys that are actually waking up to the reality that freedom is much better than the totalitarianism that the left has in mind. Where it becomes complicated for them is that as abortion, there are some absolutes that if they buy into, they're going to be called religious zealots, and they don't want that part of it. But I think that there's room for religious zealots in California. If we can be whatever we want to be and do whatever we want to do, then I think that we can make Christianity in vogue again. I think it's wonderful, frankly.
What's very cool is the fact that in fact, just last night I had a chance to speak to about 300 young people, and I'm very encouraged. A lot of people don't realize that even if they're not believers, those that are 35 and under are trending pro-life because of technology. They have apps now where you can put in, oh, I think I'm 8 weeks pregnant. there's all kinds of apps that show computer-generated design activity of what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
And this is changing people's minds. The younger generation's very pro-life. We just need to get them to vote.
Well, now that's a different issue. People have to change their voting patterns, but the Republicans are too lazy to go out and say,
Yeah.
here are the absolutes, and so it's almost become meaningless to many. But it's interesting that not only are they becoming more pro-life, we're starting to see them want to think about marriage again because they're coming from all this brokenness. You know, the baby boom generation tried it all and it's left wanting. So I think that we could see a shift, especially with that major young youth, because they've experienced the hurt, the ugly. They're seeing that nothing is going right anywhere in our society, while liberals will just keep saying, well, let's just do it more. And they're like, no. And they actually care. They care about their neighbor, if you will. They're social. And so in that social state, they want to do something. So the job of the church is to be the organization set up to help them get that done.
Exactly.
We've always been, but now we got a lazy about us, and now God's waking us up to our first mission, our first love, to get back out there and help the least of these.
Yep.
So I think that's what politicians have to do. That's why I was so glad to see you helping Larry. That's what they have to do in Washington, D.C. And there's a realigning that is going on. And even though it's dark, where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. And so when we grab a hold of that and stop becoming the complaint machine, which is happening, and it's firming up inside of the party of the right, we can't allow that as Christian conservatives. Are you kidding? God is gracious. He's full of compassion. He's alive. So why in the world would we want to think that, woe is me, everything's over? It's not over whatsoever.
Star, what would you say to the Christian community that says, oh, wow, it makes a lot of sense, Star, what you're saying, but we're Christians, and this is the world, and this is not our home. Heaven's our home, and we really don't get involved in anything like that because it's dirty. It's the world.
Right. But it's not the world. God created and wants us to create. Are you kidding? We're here for a purpose. We're to fix what we see is broken in our immediate lives. It's not about dismissing it and saying, well, I'm going to turn it anyway. What about that lot of life that you have right here? Right. You didn't ask to be here. God put you here. That's why even on abortion debate, it's like not every woman can get pregnant. So the fact that you're pregnant, honor being a mom, even if it's 1 minute, and then you turn that child to someone else that will raise them. So no, I look at everything as an opportunity. And those people that want to escape, especially the ones that say, oh, well, God's coming. Remember when the economy fell apart and everyone was losing their homes in Orange County? And oh no, that meant the rapture was next day. I'm like, maybe you should read either some history, maybe you should travel around the world and see that. No, the fact that you lost your $500,000 house.
Just go across the border here.
What I do every time I get depressed, I'd take a trip to Italy, where they were doing the catacombs and going way down deep, where they were stripping skin. I remind people and myself of how, remember when God called Nathaniel, he said, there's purity. He said, that guy's really good.
Yeah.
You know how he lost his life? They stripped his skin off.
Took his skin off.
So really? You live in Orange County, California, you're depressed talking about some rapture. I just laugh at them. I don't even have a word to say to them.
So true. I love it.
Go adopt something. Go do something. Instead of watch TV, these are the same ones that sit there and watch all that secular stuff. We wouldn't have an LGBTQ problem right now if Christian people weren't watching and laughing at all that stuff when they were trying to embed it into culture. So I think that to reverse it, go instead and help at a crisis pregnancy center, because they're going to get ready to be overwhelmed when we end abortion, when we overturn Roe v. Wade. Our centers are going to need everything. They're going to need time, talent, resource, everything they're going to need.
Can you imagine what you just said if we could somehow get the challenge across that we're going to have like 30 days of Jesus do. Just Jesus do.
That's a great.
Let's do 30 days of Jesus do. What does that mean? Okay, no technology. Let's get up, let's get out, right? And let's go after our culture.
Let's
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
something.
Let's
Let's
do
clean up our
something.
streets. Let's go and volunteer somewhere. Let's take care
Yeah.
of somebody's little child. Let's yeah, I like it.
Yeah, call
Yeah.
the city. In fact, the
You
city.
might even like it, and you know who can really do it are the singles, because all they do is
Yep.
woe is me. They want to be married. But if you go out and you do the work of Anna and others in the Scripture,
Exactly.
then you'll be fulfilled. You'll find that you're looking for instead of sitting there
Exactly.
watching TV. So why don't you do that? You're a pastor. You have a big following. Why don't we do a 30-day Jesus do?
Let's
Especially
fix-
we should do it in June, because June is now the gay month, and we can be happy gay too.
I don't even. You know what I've noticed?
Let's do it August.
Let's.
Nothing happens August.
Well,
Go
when
ahead.
these cameras turn off, let's figure it out.
Oh, we will.
Jesus do.
We have to
Something.
Jesus do
Something.
month. That's
you-
actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because just imagine. I mean, how many churches are there? And if everybody said, we can do that together, surely we are the church. And every Christian, I mean, a third of Americans still get them go to church, well, when their church is open. So that's 100 million that do that. So 100 million people in their various states on 1 month just doing something that they think the Lord would appreciate. That could actually work.
Imagine if somebody like Star Parker could even craft an assignment where the Jesus do thing is pick one of these 5 things for your church or community.
Oh, I got to give some thought to that, because one of the ideas that we have at Cure is charity tax credits. You know how you get deductions when you give your offering or give donation, but in our broken zip codes, in areas that really need attention, if we could get charity tax credits to where people volunteer in there and or they give money in there that's dollar for dollar, just like they have their per child tax credit.
That's
So
cool.
we haven't gotten that to law yet, but the discussion continues.
Yeah.
And every time there's a political turnover and Republicans in charge, you just try to get your ideas into something that they're already doing. So that's an idea that we have been trying to move forward.
You know, it comes to mind that what we're talking about is what the early church did in colonial America. The early church was the epicenter of the community's activities.
Government got in our way. When you look at what
Truly.
happened after the Civil Rights Act was signed into law, freedom was our country. We were reborn as a people. Now it became very individual, whether you're dealing with racism in your life, whether you're dealing with anger in your life, whether you're dealing with poverty in your life. That was our moment to say, let's go do what the founders had envisioned. But instead, they developed a welfare state within a year. A year later, the government's like, oh, no, your churches are not doing what you used to do. We're taking over this. And we secularized everything. And over time, it just got to where it really corrupted our society. So now we have, energy problems. We have the hard, dangerous energy is overwhelming. The creative energy, just in pockets though, but it's fixable. It really is. If we, as a body of Christ, focused on it, it is fixable, and then we can take it from the government again. It's hard to pull it out now because 7 out of $10 that comes into Washington immediately goes out to a person through a program. But over time, the way we got here, we can get out of it, but it does take long-term planning because it's 50 years that took us to get here.
So I think if citizens cared, if they just decided to care.
I think they do care, Pastor. I think they just don't know what to do. Everyone, so it's easier to tune it out.
Which, by the way, this is a good place for us to start wrapping this up. We're very committed, as you well know, to being a church of non-spectator faith. We don't believe in a spectator faith. That if a believer believes, then they're going to go do the Jesus
Do
thing.
the thing, yeah.
And so you spoke here rather recently, and you don't know this, but you came out here and you were so gracious because the schedule had to get shifted up for some reason, I forget. You came out like about 4 hours ahead of schedule, and you delivered a message that was to Come Back California, I believe it was, or whatever that special event was. what you said was so anointed, it was so powerful,
Thank you.
and it got a lot of traction, and so much so that soon I have a plan to show it here. I'm going to introduce it to the congregation and what the event was, and then throw you up on the screens and have it played.
Oh, wow.
Because of the magnitude and the impact of what you said was so true, so honest, so direct, and your voice needs to get out so much more. I know you're out there, but it needs to get out more. And I know that when you look up Star Parker's name, it will say most often activist. And I hate that title in most contexts, but here's how I view it because of having seen you in person speak, is if you want to label her activist, it's because she's activated.
Oh, okay.
You have been activated. You want to slap activist, whatever, but you have been so activated. You are truly preaching and saying and offering what you believe. And so what can our audience do to help you? Where can they send their love?
Oh, they can send their love to curepolicy.org for sure. Curepolicy.org. We are a nonprofit, and we can use every dollar, and we do it wisely to get the messaging out for sure in those 3 areas that I mentioned, but also the encouragement of prayer, and then to be active in what we're asking them to do. One of the reasons I started Cure is to get poverty issues out of Washington, D.C. Charity belongs to the church. It belongs to local communities. Yeah. And we've allowed government to take over and destroy people's lives. So I want it out of there so they can also volunteer. Our pregnancy care centers really need their help. This is a big deal for me because when women say no, men will go to work and then they'll marry.
Imagine.
So, and that's what has broken down. In fact, I just did my column and I'm looking at the numbers of what happens to men when they get lost. Marriage is a social stabilizer. God put the biological clock in a woman to help stabilize our society. But when marriage breaks down, men get lost. And now we have a lot of lost men. So we're seeing suicide rates. We're seeing the gun violence. So they're always lone men. They're just lost. In society, and it's women that help them. So when because of birth control and welfare state and abortion, women are not demanding marriage. And then they don't demand marriage, men lose track, they won't work. You should see the numbers. In fact, my column, it's out this week. You'll look at that and see the numbers of the men that are just dropping out of society. They're just dropping out of work. And now the women are the ones working, and marriage is totally collapsed.
Where's this column?
My column? Oh, it's at curepolicy.org too, but it's a nationally syndicated column. I don't know where it runs around here. It used to be an Orange County Register, but then they sold and they did all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's all across the country, and a lot of papers all across the country.
Wow.
And a lot of websites. I don't know where that thing is. I write it for creators, and then they get it out everywhere.
So great.
I know. I just found out I'm in Chattanooga every Sunday. The guy said, "Yeah, you're in my Chattanooga paper every Sunday, 250,000 people." I'm like, "Really? I never knew." Yeah, it is great because I knew I was in Nashville, and I know I'm in a lot of low places, but I had no idea I was in Chattanooga on a Sunday morning, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, back to the point that the church is the model for what people need to do, and I think that the more we understand that, you know how when what is the scripture? You know it where you have more responsibility. To whom
much is given, much is required.
That's right. So we're required to recover our lives,
and that's not a punishment.
Our lives.
He
No,
didn't. He
I
didn't
think
give
it's
us
wonderful.
He didn't give us that statement as a punishment. You
No.
know, to whom much is given, much is required. He gave that to us as a motivator. It should be like, really?
Wow.
When you're faithful with a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
I love what you just said, and I don't know if it was through Ben Shapiro or Dennis Prager, whatever group it was, but something to the effect. But this I do remember, where the question was put forth: who do you think is better off, the single man or the married man? And most people thought, the single guy, he can do whatever he wants. And he can do, well, if he can do whatever he wants, he also sleeps in. And he also doesn't engage. What happens is, at the end of a certain time frame, I don't remember if it was 45 or 55, whatever it was, the married man makes more money
That's right.
because he's motivated.
That's right.
And the married man has less mental health challenges,
right.
and he's physically healthier.
Every
The
area.
married- in
every area. You know what it's
area.
like? He can do whatever he wants. It's like a child that you don't have the fence up.
Yep.
They don't go out because you gotta, right. And women are their social stabilizers,
Oh,
so
no
that
doubt.
they reach their goals. And the challenge that we have with more single men is single men are promiscuous men,
Yep.
generally speaking. And promiscuous men, they're creating dangerous men. 95% of the men in our prison system have no relationship with their dad. Now, the blacks want to reverse it and try to make it seem like it's racial. It's not racial, because when you see black husbands married to the mother of their children, we can't even measure the difference in how their children fare, whether it's educational, crime, economically, when we compare it to whites where the husband's married to the mother of children. But where you see single life, that's where you have this disparity. 75% of those young boys in our criminal justice system, they don't have a relationship with their dad. They're from single households, these guys. And marriage in the black community, unfortunately, has broken down at a faster pace than in the white community. So now you have about 30% of black adults married. In the white community, they're right at 50%. That's why you're starting to see the same pathologies that we thought were only in our poor communities everywhere in society. We can recover this if all we do is get rid of abortion, so women will be much more mindful about their sexual expressions and learn to say no again. You say no, they'll marry you. And when they get married, they fare better. That's how God designed it, and it's worked throughout history, as you've said, and we thought we knew better, and we were enlightened, and we changed things, and now we're looking at the data saying this is not good.
Wow. You know, you mentioned 75%. The first time I ever heard that was from a man who said the reason why there are more black men in prison is because 75% of those men grew up in homes where their dads fathered them, but was never a
Abandoned
dad.
the family. That's right.
And abandoned the family. And that's got to change. You know who said that? Barack Obama said that.
Yeah, yeah.
Barack Obama said that.
And then he made it to the presidency, and he turned that race card out. And and didn't look back anymore at the damage that he was doing to these young men. And I think that that's why we saw a lot of black young men gravitate toward Trump, because they need that. They need someone, all men need someone that channels their energy from the streets to sports or to schooling to something. And usually it's the wife that will help do that in a man's life. And that's what makes society work. You're right, including aging. Men don't age well alone. And we can go on. This is the data I study through CURE. This is what we do. We try to fix things. We just came out with our first tome, a book, The State of Black America. And it's the alternative to what we've been hearing from the Urban League and all the rest of them in their State of Black America since the 50s, that every problem that happens in these communities is somebody else's fault. And we just came out with ours and said, we're going to take an in-depth look at the history the good, the bad, the ugly, and then we're going to try to move forward. And so next year when we come out with it, we're going to look at where it broke down in social policy and make sure that the society recognizes that this is not about race. The challenges we're having today are moral challenges. It's about spiritual well-being.
Amen.
And we've lost that in our culture. We've lost it all throughout our culture. So now we have to get to the place that when Nehemiah, he was crying, he went and told them, and they said, will you build? You want to do this? And people said yes. That's why I'm encouraged, because they all said yes.
Amen.
But he did go around the leaders to get to the
Yeah.
people. He had to go around all
And he
the...
slapped a few guys around.
Well, he had to slap a few guys around.
You know,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
deserved
well.
it.
Well, you said I'm Deborah. I think she slapped around a few
Deborah.
people too.
Yeah, exactly right.
So yeah, I think that you know, if the Christians will get their encouragement back, that God saved them,
Yeah.
and then I think that we can get our country back and get our culture back.
So listen, you've got some materials that people can get at cure.org, right?
Yeah,
Books?
well, you got to go to curepolicy.org.
Curepolicy.org, and there's books that you've
we have
authored.
everything. We have books. We don't bother you. We just once a week you're going to get an email, or to have my TV show in there, or have my podcast in there, or have some research we've done in there. So just once a week and kind of go through all of that. But books are available and things like this as well, including the State of Black America. And then annually we have a policy summit for the clergy that are serving in those zip codes. And so we really want people to come to the one that we have coming up in October this year, because it's 1 month before the election. And so we're encouraging people to send their gifts to us so that we can scholar pastors that are in some of our battleground Senate states and get them in a room for 3 days and lock the door and let them know that that Tuesday they need to encourage their congregation to stop voting against their Christianity.
Wow.
Don't vote your color, vote your Christ. That's what we're doing this year.
Where and when again?
It's in Washington, D.C. every year, but it's in the fall. It's in October, the first week. But this year, we're really pushing in to get pastors that are from those different states to come in and listen to this regular diet of what has broken down, and in particular, for their congregations, and how it is imperative that they do what you do on Sunday. They inform their congregations, say, you know what? We love God, but we're voting against him. And we need to stop. Don't worry about whether it's a D or an R anymore.
That's
Just go
right.
and vote your values.
Biblical worldview values.
That's right. That's right. So that's in October for us.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, you guys, Star Parker, so send your love to curepolicy.org, curepolicy.org. I would love for you guys to respond to her website, because she mentioned the word sponsorship to get leaders to this conference that they can make a difference in their community. That's how we're going to experience things changing in America. Two different ways. Revival will take place within the church. It's the church that must be revived. When the church is revived, the culture is changed. If you study revival in history, that's exactly what happens. She mentioned Nehemiah a couple of times. That's exactly what happened. And that's what the hope for California is. It's in the church. It's not in the State House. It's in God's house. And so please remember, pray for Star Parker, support Star Parker, curepolicy.org. Awesome materials there. And Star, it's great having you.
Thank you.
Love your boldness.
God bless you,
Love your
Pastor.
clarity.
Thank
God
you.
bless.